From Fox 13 Sports, this is Seattle Sports Live.
Welcome into the second episode of the On the Sidelines podcast. I'm Ethan McReynolds, joined alongside by my partner in crime, D-Jack. We got a lot in store for today's episode, a lot of Seahawks news, some breaking news today on this Tuesday. The Seahawks making their first round of roster cuts to save some salary space going into the offseason. We're also talking Sounders, disappointing result against RSL. We're going to get into it. And a reality check from head coach Brian Schmetzer that you're not going to want to miss. But first, Dante, the Seahawks. Let me pull up the tweet so I don't mess up any of the details. So the Seahawks, 45 minutes ago, before we recorded this Tuesday morning, they have released Roy Robertson-Harris, defensive tackle, safety Rayshon Jenkins, tackle George Fant, and defensive lineman Draymond Jones. What's sort of your reaction to? They saved $28 million in cap space as well. What's your reaction?
You know what? It couldn't happen soon enough, I feel, because these were moves that needed to be made. The money needs to be freed up for my guy, Ernest Jones, and we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, and not. I don't think anyone on that list that anyone's particularly surprised about. The one name that stood out to me was Roy Robertson-Harris. I'm sort of bummed that he's leaving. Mike McDonald had a lot of good things to say about him throughout the season. Big physical defensive tackle, right? He's not going to have all the flashy numbers like Jaron Reed with the sacks or, Leonard Williams just wreaking havoc from the interior, but he did a lot for that run defense.
Yes, he did when he came in kind of late in the season. You can't have enough big people in this game. And so with that being said, I hate to be losing a big person, somebody down in the trenches. If this is a game of trenches, like Roy Robinson belongs here.
Yeah, so. and maybe that frees up, I don't know, it makes defensive line more of a need now going into the draft, which we're going to touch on in a little bit. But you wanted to talk about your guy, Ernest Jones. Let's enter Dante's Inferno for a second. What do you have to say to John Schneider of the Seahawks?
All right, John Schneider, you on the clock. And I'm not talking about the NFL draft. What's going on with Ernest Jones? Why isn't he signed already? I mean, the guy came in early, mid-season in October and became a leader on this team. 138 tackles, 2 interceptions. Why isn't he signed already? Get to it, John Schneider, right now.
And I will say, him making these cuts could be a first step in reworking Geno Smith's contract, extending DK Metcalf. We're going to talk about him as well. Signing in Ernest Jones.
Hey, I wanted to lock him up early, though.
Yep.
We're a week away from free agency. You're going to let him go and look at other clubs.
Yeah.
And Denver is in the lurch waiting. They're looking at chops. They want to sign to Ernest Jones. You think some of these teams didn't see what he brought to the Hawks, the physicality, the smartness, the intelligence he brought? I mean, they gave him the green dot the day he arrived. And the day he arrived, this defense, all it did was improve. So, John Schneider, you should have already signed a guy. I mean, he should be a Seahawk for at least the next 3 or 4 years. Lock him up now.
Yeah. This defense needs him. I mean, you saw the difference in the run defense
specifically. Exactly.
And nothing against Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker, but they were not getting the job done. And we saw with Ernest Jones how that position should be playing to Mike McDonald defense.
And John Schneider should be running to the bank to give him the money because he actually is John Schneider's saving grace. I mean, you made the mistake with Jerome Baker and Tyrell Dodson. You had to release them. Those were your 2 big offseason acquisitions. In come Ernest Jones to clean up the mess and make you look like a great GM or a genius that many people think you are. You owe Ernest Jones a deal. Bring him in.
With how well he played last year, it's interesting that the Rams didn't want him. They ship him off to Tennessee, and then Tennessee doesn't want to keep him through training camp. So, the Rams traded him to Tennessee during training camp, and then Tennessee trades him mid-year. It's surprising that the Seahawks were his 3rd team in however many years.
I was curious. It was peculiar that such a great player could be let go like that and just passed around, and so. When they acquired him, the first thing I'm thinking is, what's wrong with him?
Right.
And that's what you're thinking, and you expecting him to have personality problems or, not a good teammate. By all accounts, he came in, became a leader. He did nothing but produce. I want Ernest Jones signed today, John Schneider.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to keep our eyes on that. And you mentioned free agency is looming. I do not want Ernest Jones getting to free agency. I feel like you're in the same boat
You
as well.
can't let him out there. You can't let him out there. I mean, he came in and changed the dynamic of this defense. Let's not forget those first couple of weeks when the Seahawks defense was flailing. We couldn't tackle anybody. He brought that physicalness, that physicality. He can seek and destroy. He can tackle. He covers. He's 25 years old, so he's young. He still has a lot of game left. Why isn't this guy signed already?
Yeah, John Schneider, D-Jack's talking to you right now. Better be listening. Let's shift gears to the NFL draft. That's coming up. The combine has just come and gone, right? Who do you think the Seahawks need to be targeting? Any position? What are you looking for as we get into the draft side of the sports schedule?
Well, I'm like everybody else. I say O-line, offensive line. I guess, but my question is, do we trust John Schneider to build this O-line? He's been here over a decade, and he's had minimal success at drafting that position. So do we trust him to pick the players that we need? Now, I think the fans, everybody is fed up. We finally want that O-line to protect Geno so we can take this team to the next level. And without that, the Seahawks are going nowhere. They'll be in the same place they were this year, and that's at the house.
Well, and it starts and ends with the trenches. I don't think anyone can argue the fact that the Seahawks need to improve in that area of the field.
But let me ask you this, Ethan.
Yeah.
Is there a position that you think is being overlooked that maybe the Seahawks should look at, that people we're all focused on the offensive line, but there's a couple other needs they have?
Yeah, the needs do not stop with the offensive line. I feel like on the defensive side of the ball, there's still room to improve. I would look at the safety position. I would look at the corner position as well. Cornerback specifically, Reek Woolen had some ups, but he also had some downs, right? Mike McDonald sat him for the start of a series for something that was going on, and then the cornerback spot opposite of Reek Woolen with Devin Witherspoon when he's playing most of his snaps in the slot when they're running nickel. Trey Brown wasn't really performing up to what you would want from that position. Nehemiah Pritchett started for a couple of games this season, the rookie out of Auburn, because of injury. So not a lot of depth at that cornerback position. I would love to see them address that need. And then at safety, I love what Julian Love brings on the field and from a leadership perspective.
He's been one of the best players on defense also. You got to put him on that list, top 5 on defense. I
don't think he's irreplaceable. I also don't think that Kobe Bryant is irreplaceable. I know they just released Rayshon Jenkins. We just mentioned that. So Kobe Bryant's going to enter at least free agency right now. He's your penciled-in starter at that safety position. But I think the Seahawks can do better there. I mean, what happened to the days of the Earl Thomas and the Cam Chancellors anchoring down that Legion of Boom offense? That defense is not the same without it coming from the back of that defense. If you're throwing across the middle, Cam Chancellor is there. Earl Thomas is shooting down like a missile going down to make that tackle.
And speaking of Cam Chancellor, there is a Cam Chancellor clone in the NFL draft, the safety out of South Carolina. I wrote his name down because I didn't want to mispronounce it. Nick Imanwari, 6'2", 220, running a 4.3, can hit, can cover. He's projected in some mock drafts to go to the Seahawks. He's a Cam Chancellor type. I mean, nobody will be like Bam Bam. Mm-hmm. He was, all-time great here with Seattle. But it's some guys in the pipeline that the Seahawks are rumored to be looking at.
Well, and you mentioned the 4.3 speed. Imanwari's got, what, you said he was 6'2", 225.
Yes, a specimen.
Cam's 6'3", 230, and he ran a 4.7 40. So imagine I'm not gonna say that Nick is Cam Chancellor. I feel like that's
the measurables are comparable.
The measurables, body, if we're looking at the measurables, he's Cam Chancellor with a 4.3 40, which is very, very intriguing when you're going into an NFL draft.
Now, I believe Cam Chancellor was late in the draft, maybe 4th or 5th round pick. So that's the difference right there, is the speed. The fact that he ran a 4.7 caused him to slip and enabled the Seahawks to pick him up. So this guy is running a 4.3 at 220. He's a physical specimen. He's first round talent I think they have him late first round, early second
Maybe
round
early
right
second.
now.
Yeah.
Projection.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that name for the Seahawks. You asked me about some sort of under the radar draft needs for the Seahawks. Who do you have any under the radar
Running
needs?
back. Running back. I think you need to pick up a running back. You need to invest in that position, I believe, every year. And the new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, is talking about a fullback. So I don't know if that's an H-back type, tight end type. I have no idea. But I actually want a running back. And by all accounts, that's a deep position in this year's draft. I think you need to get some young legs in there, definitely.
Where are we talking in the draft? Where do you want to see the Seahawks pick up a running
I
back?
wouldn't mind seeing a 4th or 5th round pick. And, you know, they gave up a 4th round pick in the Jerome Baker, Ernest Jones deal. So I don't know how many picks they have.
Right.
But I'm just talking about a late round pick, but you have to invest in that position. And that's a position where you can find a productive player in the 4th or 5th round, especially at the running back position. So I don't think you have to spend a lot of draft capital on a new running back, but I think you need one in the fold because our position right now with Kenneth Walker as the starter and Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker has shown that he's not durable. He hasn't lasted a season since he's joined the Seahawks. Not one full season yet. You can't help the club in a tub, is what I say. And Ken Walker is always hurt. He's never available. I'm just going to call it what I'm sorry, Ethan. Like, hey, I just got to call it like I see it. You can't help the club in the tub.
You can't.
Right?
You can't.
And you know what? Zach Charbonnet has shown that he's capable also. So, I mean, I don't know if it's controversial or not, but I say swap those positions. Zach Charbonnet has earned that starting spot with Ken Walker becoming a change of pace, and it fits with Mike McDonald's scheme if he wants to set the tone and be physical. That physical runner right now on this roster is Zach Charbonnet. Zach Charbonnet, D-Jack just promoted you.
Well, and I like your point because we saw what the Detroit Lions did last year with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and they were both absolutely electric. They both got theirs, right? They were both getting all the carries that they need, all the yardage. You know, I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs carried me to well, I didn't make it to the fantasy football playoffs, but he was the best player on my team, and he was the second running back to David Montgomery. So
yes, I think that's a perfect comparison where we know Ken Walker's talent. We know his talent is the best on the Seahawks in that running back room. He's the most talented. Let's say that. We know this. However, you have to be the fit too. You have to be a great fit, and I think Zach Charbonnet's running style fits better with what Mike McDonald wants to accomplish with this team, and that's be physical, possess the ball, you know, play defense. Ken Walker trying to bounce everything to the outside is just not working for me. I love Ken Walker. I love to see him when he does break that and makes that big play, but those plays are few and far between.
Well, and you know, we're talking about the running backs. John Schneider at the Combine said, to your point, he really likes the running back class. That makes me hesitate a little bit, getting a little bit of PTSD for all of the early round picks John Schneider has taken running backs, which I am not a big fan of.
No.
Right?
No.
So you said 4th round pick. I'd be okay with in the 5th to 7th round range.
Okay, I'm not mad at you. We
got 2 second-round picks
I just think
already.
You need to invest in the position.
Sure.
That is it. Now, I understand you cannot spend a lot of draft capital on a running back when you got Zach Charbonnet and Ken Walker in the fold. I understand that. But you must invest in that position, especially when you're trying to be a physical team that runs the ball more times than not. So with Ken Walker's history of being injured and his availability, you have to invest in that position. So I think this is the year to do it. Everybody says it's a deep draft. Let's go ahead and get a running back.
Well, it's a deep draft of the defensive line as well, so it'll be interesting to see how they replace Roy Robertson-Harris there, and if they improve at that position, which was super deep last year.
Can't get enough big positions. Big people. You need big people.
Keep loaded. And we're talking a lot about other positions, but don't get us wrong, it's offensive line, and then it's everything else.
It's
right?
offensive line, then everything else. So
throw some more offensive lines in there. That wasn't even enough.
Offensive line, one more there, because this is a position we just can't get right. And I guess the question is, can we trust John Schneider to pick those players? he's had problems over the years finding that lineman, and the ones that were serviceable didn't make it past their first contract. I think the Seahawks have like one lineman that was drafted in the last 10 years that's made it to the second contract.
I think the last one was Russell Okung, right?
Exactly. So and so that's over 10 years. So I mean, his philosophy is kind of to use them up and then let them go. Well, that means we're not developing them, and that leads us to our next subject, which is DK Metcalf.
Right.
Because I feel like the rumors out there is talking about trading DK Metcalf. I think people are crazy for that because you drafted him. Found a diamond in the rough in the second round, I believe. You drafted him. You developed him. He produced. Now it's time to pay the guy. That's what comes next. Most people leave that part out. You draft, you develop, you produce, you get paid. And so DK has earned whatever contract that he's demanding. I think is to a certain extent. He should be between 25 and 30 million. Definitely. He might not be Justin Jefferson, but he is the Seahawks' Justin Jefferson.
Well, so, yeah, this is a really interesting conversation. Do you trade DK Metcalf or do you not? I think, I will say, to your point, they already have paid him. This would be a second re-signing, which I think is significant because he'd be demanding more money. He's already making, $24 million a year right now. He's going to be demanding more of that. So that's more resources that you're taking off the line of scrimmage and putting into your receiving core when you need more resources on your offensive line. So for me, DK Metcalf's a special talent, right?
Yes,
I
he
think
is.
95% of the time he uses his talents well. And he,
the other 5%? What's the other 5%?
The other 5% is 15-yard penalties.
Okay.
It's no secret that DK likes to get in guys' faces, and he's not going to shy away from a fight. And he was better this last year, but don't tell me that he was perfect last year.
No.
2 years ago, it was awful, and it was unbearable, and I was screaming at my TV every single Sunday. This last year was better. But better's not good enough when you're talking about 15-yard penalties that, in this new Kubiak system, there's not going to be a lot of explosive plays. You're going to be ground and pound, super methodical, playing more of the field position game like Pete Carroll. 15-yard penalties, that's a punt every single time. So the selfish plays, I have very little
I don't recall one game we lost, the Seahawks lost because of a 15-yard DK Metcalf
I'm not
penalty.
saying, one play doesn't
result
in a loss.
He's not costing you a win or a loss with that. So I don't get it. He was better last year. He needed to correct that behavior, and I think he has for the most part. But this is football. This is a violent game. This is a collision sport. You need that edge in order to be successful in this game. Some people have to play all the way up to the edge. DK goes just across that line, and then he brings it back. So, no, I don't think it's a problem at all. You need that edge. He's the only player on the Hawks that I recall that has that edge. So he's good. He's one of one. You re-sign this guy. You don't back the Brinks up, for lack of a better term. I mean, you have a budget. You have, a max. But he's earned another contract.
I will say,
for sure.
and despite, my problems with that behavior, I don't think the Seahawks should just get rid of him like that. That's the flat answer. In my opinion, I feel like you need to get enough back for him in order to, make it worth it. I think if you're getting anything less than a first-round pick back for DK Metcalf, if you're John Schneider, you hang up the phone. It was reported by Corbin Smith, and, there's been some people that have pushed back on it, but Corbin is reporting, and he's sticking to it, that the Packers are willing to offer a first-round pick and one of their young wide receivers, Romeo Doubs or Dontavian Wicks. That intrigues me. I don't love Doubs and Wicks. I think for me to be comfortable with the trade, it would be a first-round pick plus a player maybe a little bit above Doubs and Wicks. So I'm not totally sold, but what do you think of that trade-off?
Now, let's break this down. On one hand, you say he's not Justin Jefferson and we're not going to pay him like that. But you expected a first-round pick and an NFL starter at his position, in order to trade him. That is not happening. We had the wide receiver Davante Adams from the Las Vegas Raiders be traded to the Jets for a third rounder. And I understand Davante Adams is a lot older, but he's still his production still outweighed DK Metcalf. So that's the comp that I'm gonna use right now. So you got Davante Adams as a third rounder, getting traded for a third rounder, but you want a first and an NFL starter for DK Metcalf?
And that's how high the price is. That's how valuable DK is to the Seahawks for me. That's why the price has to be so high if you're willing to part with him. Now,
you're going to end up keeping him because you ain't getting a first rounder and an NFL starter.
You're probably
no disrespect to Corbin Smith. I mean, I appreciate your report, but I don't believe it. I think it's smoke.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. You got to get a lot in return for me to say that it's worth it to trade DK Metcalf. Because
so do you trade DK?
Do I trade
Let's
DK?
answer the question. Do you trade DK?
If you can get enough. But I also don't think that, if Corbin's report is true, I don't think they're going to get any more than that. I think that's the tippy top. And I even that trade that Corbin's reporting, I still sort of got some cold feet. So
yeah, you kind of hedging your bets there.
That's the difficult part is if you keep DK Metcalf, he's in the final year of his deal. You need to re-sign him or he walks for free. If you re-sign him, you're talking $30 million a year. DK Metcalf is not a top 10 wide receiver in this league. You're going to be paying him like that. And you need to get that production when you're just now committing to an offensive coordinator and a head coach, a defensive head coach who wants to run the ball. You're going to put all those resources into your receiving core. And I'm not saying not to put resources into your receiving core, but it's a little bit backwards when you can use that money differently.
But DK is the only receiver that you're paying. JSN is still on his rookie contract. Tyler Lockett is rumored to be let go or released or even retired. So who are you paying? You have to pay somebody. And that's the cost of doing business. You have to pay your best players. You have to pay them, which goes back to Ernest Jones. It's rumored that he wants $15 million. Guess what? He's worth it to the Seahawks. You're not worth you only worth what you can negotiate. And I think DK Metcalf can negotiate a $30 million contract, and he can warrant that because he means that much to the Seahawks.
I think in baseball you can say you have to pay guys because there's no hard cap. In the NFL there is a cap. You can only pay guys so much. Right? So you only have a certain amount of money to allocate. You're not really paying anyone on the offensive line. You have to get ready for a Charles Cross extension. You need to get that done because other than him, you haven't hit on any draft picks. Abe Lucas hopefully turns it around this year and is fully healthy. But my point is you can reallocate the resources that you would be using on DK Metcalf to other spots within the team to where it would be more beneficial to your football team overall. Right now,
you won't have a DK Metcalf.
With DK Metcalf on the team, what has this team done? It's not working. You're in football purgatory. You've got the last draft pick out of all the teams that didn't make the playoffs. If you made the playoffs, you're one and done. You're not contending for a Super Bowl with this roster as it's currently constructed. So, I think that John Schneider, you got to turn every rock over right now when it comes to how this roster is built because it's not working. And I know that they're not satisfied. The ownership's not satisfied.
It sounds like you're ready to cut bait. It sounds like you're ready for a deal.
I'm impatient. I want John Schneider to do what's best for this football team. And if that means trading DK Metcalf, I'll be upset. DK's fun to watch. But if that's what's going to get them closer to a Super Bowl, then I'm all for it as a Seahawks fan.
So what do you say to the people that say you drafted him, you developed him, now it's time to pay him?
You already paid him.
All right, pay him again. He keeps producing.
Look, sports at the end of the day is a business.
Okay.
So if you draft a guy, you're supposed to keep paying him until he's 60.
No.
At some point, it makes sense to move on.
He's still young. He's still producing. He's still one of the top receivers on the team. Everybody, enamored with JSN, and rightfully so. JSN had a great year. He's emerging. But I'm not sold on JSN. I need to see another year from JSN at the same production. He needs to establish himself and be consistent. So I know DK Metcalf has proven himself, and he's been consistent his whole tenure here. He's a proven commodity. And those are the type of players that you pay.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. At the end of the day, I don't think the Seahawks end up pulling the trigger on a trade. I feel like, people have said this, but when they hired Clint Kubiak, I'm sure one of the first questions is, how do you use DK Metcalf? How do you get the most out of his talent? And, obviously they were happy with Clint Kubiak's answer.
Last point on DK. You're talking about Clint Kubiak and the way he wants to use DK. He's one of the best blocking wide receivers in the NFL.
Yep.
One of the most physical wide receivers in the NFL. So he can strive. He can succeed in any system, I believe.
Well, and another point, the Eagles just won the Super Bowl. They've got two guys in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown who are in the top 10 in wide receiver payroll. So it's possible. But if you need to free up resources to put them in the offensive line, DK Metcalf is a place where you can do it, potentially. And so I wouldn't, just shut that door completely. That's my take. We can agree to disagree there.
Yeah, and I don't understand how other teams can do it, and the Seahawks can't. You got the Bengals with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins.
Well, I don't know if the Bengals are the best example. They just missed the playoffs in a very
But they have those two, and they made it to the Super Bowl most recently. So, I mean, you have teams out there with two players. You have those examples out there. Why can't the Hawks do it? As I think about their roster, I don't know who they're paying. Like I said, now Tyler Lockett is a $17 million hit on the cap, but he's rumored to be released. So who are you paying? You have to pay somebody. JSN is still on this rookie contract. Everybody else is...
There's a lot of guys coming up. Boye Mafe, Charles Cross. Do you keep Ken Walker? Do you keep Zach Charbonnet? Those are... Abe Lucas is sort of coming up. So there's some guys where you're going to have to be giving up a significant amount of money to re-sign. Uchenna Nwosu, what do you do with him? So...
All of those players you just named are just guys, or has been for the last couple years. Let's call it like we see it. I heard they're not DK Metcalf. They're not at his type production. Every last player you just named are not at DK Metcalf's level of production. Maybe Boye Mafe,
I would
simply
say,
because of the potential. But after 5 years in the league, and you tempting on double-digit sacks, but you're really not getting there, and you tail off at the butt end of every season. Like, are we gonna throw the bag at him?
I think you have to take into account the value at each position. Charles Cross and Boye Mafe, the production that you're getting at those positions, in my opinion, is more valuable than a 900 to 1,000 yard season from DK Metcalf. So. Not that I don't love DK Metcalf and watching him, and I feel like all offensive coordinators since he's been here in Seattle has been able to. I think everyone has a hand in not using him properly, so I hope that Clint Kubiak's able to get the best of him this year. But I think you got to look at everything if you're the Seahawks, because right now what they're doing is not good enough.
I
think we both agree on that. So
right.
Let's move on.
Yes.
Yeah. We got some Sounders to talk about. It's not the best of, I'm not super excited to talk Sounders today because they sort of got their butts kicked at RSL. Did you know at RSL they haven't won there since 2011?
Yes.
It's been almost 14 years since they've won at RSL. So I think I mentioned last week the LAFC streak, how they broke that in the playoffs last year. They haven't been able to break this RSL one, and it sort of went from They thought they were going to be up. That's the wrong clip. 1 sec. There we go. There's the highlights. Sorry if you're watching the audio.
The lowlights.
The lowlights. So you think you're going up 1-0. Jordan Morris with the amazing header off the corner from Rusnak. Georgie Manungu heads it in when he's in the offside position. Ball was going in anyway. Right. And then you go from there, less than 90 seconds, well, not 90 seconds, but less than 2 minutes later, Nuhu heads the ball into his own net. Fry's calling Pete. Nuhu doesn't hear him. It doesn't matter. The ball should not be going to the back of the net. It's.
And I love Nuhu, but Nuhu has been Charles Barkley's terrible this year. Let's call it what it is. I mean, Nuhu has been bad. And that own goal right there, the momentum he's carrying, you would think he's trying to score in the other team's goal. Miscommunication, I think not. That was a bad play by Nuhu. and hopefully he can play better in the upcoming games because we need that guy.
I think Nuhu physically is one of the more gifted outside backs in the entire league, like defensively lockdown. You like your lockdown corners in the NFL. Nuhu is literally that on the left flank of the Sounders
that
defense.
RSL game, it was a bad game.
But I will say mentally is where Nuhu just checks out sometimes. You had the handball at the end of the RSL game last year that gives them the penalty to win that one. He's had a couple of. It just feels like 3 to 4 times every single year Nuhu just does something.
Well, let me ask you,
what are you thinking?
Let me ask you this: do you think those defenders, those backline defenders, are feeling the pressure from the new attacking style? I mean, it seems like they're pressing. The miscommunication with Fry, it's just uncharacteristic of Sounders teams. They're usually a lot better in some of these decisions.
Well, and you saw a little bit of that last year, right? There was a lot of self-inflicted wounds going on, and it's like you've got this great roster on paper, but you're not applying it in the games, and you're not finishing games off. So I don't know. It's tricky. I don't have the answer to that question. I think you've got the players. You're too deep. You have 2 starters at each position. So depth isn't a problem, and I don't know what it is.
The question: can you be too deep? Does Schmetzer have too many choices? Because I'm upset to not see De La Vega in the MLS games. Mm-hmm. It seems like I guess they have a rotation where he's playing the CONCACAF. And I ask you, like, what's more important? Is it CONCACAF or is it MLS? For me, it's keep the main thing the main thing. Mm-hmm. The Sounders are an MLS team, and I want an MLS Cup. Now, the CONCACAF is a great achievement for sure, but I don't understand why De La Vega can't play in them all.
Yeah, I mean, I can guarantee you they're not going to do that because of his hamstring, the injury issues last year. The last thing that you want is for him to re-aggravate something. He's out for 2 months, and then he's got to, re-get into the team and everything. That would send this season sideways, in my opinion. So they're not going to do that.
You can't handle a professional athlete with kid gloves. Is he healthy? Is he ready to go? By all accounts, they say yes.
They're resting everyone,
They
though.
check the boxes.
They're resting everyone.
And that's the problem. We're 4 games in. These guys have been training all off season. It's time for them to play. It's time to go. Now, you can manage that middle of the season. You can manage that at the back of the season. But right now, I want to see our frontline starters play, and I want to get wins. I don't want you saving anybody because it's a year-by-year league. You don't know. He can go in the next game and hurt his hamstring. Totally happenstance. Like, what are you saving him for? No, let's play the guy.
It would be irresponsible to play him 3 games in a week.
I'm not saying play him 90 minutes, Ethan. I'm not saying it, but to have him, why aren't you starting the game out with him? Why are you bringing him off the bench late in the game, start it with him, and then substitute him? I mean,
to go back to your question. To go back to your question, which competition is more important? The CONCACAF Champions Cup is bigger at this point in time than the MLS regular season, in my opinion. Brian Schmetzer's decisions with the lineup is showing that he feels that way as well. I think, the question is, why is Pedro playing against a Guatemalan side and not in regular season play against better teams?
That's my question.
I think it's to have him on that schedule. The Sounders play Cruz Azul tomorrow. Pedro de la Vega is going to start in that game, I'm almost certain, because of the schedule that Schmetzer has him on. He would not be able to start that game if he started against RSL with the way that they're doing rotation. Okay. So I think having that full-strength 11, having Paul Arriola and Pedro de la Vega on the wings for Cruz Azul is going to be really important. But
do you think they beat Cruz Azul?
It's going to be tough.
I don't want to throw.
It's going to be tough. So Jackson Phelps was on Washington Sports Wrap yesterday, and Aaron Levine asked him the same question. Jackson knows a lot more about international soccer than I do. I've never watched a legal MX game. I'm not going to act like I have. Jackson was talking about how Cruz Azul's having a lot's up in the air with Cruz Azul. They fired their coach, I think, in the second week of the season. Their stadium, there's stuff going on there, so we'll see where the Sounders away leg next Tuesday, a week from today, is going to be played. So there's a lot of uncertainty with Cruz Azul, so maybe the Sounders are getting them at a good time, is what Jackson was saying. So I'm optimistic. And you're going to have a full-strength 11 going into tomorrow. at home. And offensively in both games they've played at home, they have been very, very good. But the one thing I wanted to get back to with this RSL games is you can have whatever lineup that you want, but if you don't execute, which Steph Fry talked about after the RSL game, it doesn't really matter.
Especially on the road in a place that's historically speaking has been difficult for us. You cannot dig yourselves holes like that. So we have to try to find ways to be sharper and eliminate those mistakes, because I think we're a really good squad, and we've obviously now in league shot ourselves in the foot a couple of times, and we got to sort that out.
So, self-inflicted wounds. I feel like Seahawks fans heard that all year from Mike McDonald, from Geno Smith with all the penalties. Last year it was the Sounders with the mental mistakes, not being able to hold late leads, and here we are again. I'm not happy. If I have to hear the word self-inflicted wound one more time, that's where I'm at. I'm just sort of out of patience with that, and it's frustrating.
Already?
And I'm sure
Already
with the Sounders last season and the Seahawks. With the Seahawks mostly, I wanted to make a compilation of the amount of times in post-game pressers.
Yes.
Geno Smith and Mike McDonald saying we just shot ourselves in the foot.
Yes.
Don't shoot yourself in the foot then. It's not that simple, but for me it's frustrating to see as a fan, because you have the talent. You know what I mean?
The talent is there definitely with the Sounders. They have to communicate better, which I don't understand, because haven't you been working on that all off season?
Mm-hmm.
And I will be honest, just when I look at Stephen Fry, he seems a tick off to me. I won't blame him for the own goals. I think it's more the backline defenders making bad plays. However, Stephen Fry hasn't looked the same.
I don't know. I wouldn't make too much of that. He got off to a slow start at the beginning of last year as well. Had a couple of goals that I think he'd like back, coming off an injury and everything. Remember the performance against LAFC? He had 10 saves in that game. That was the most that he'd had in a game since MLS Cup against Toronto, when he made that iconic save against Josie Altidore that won them MLS Cup. So he put in a prime vintage Steph Fry performance in the playoffs just last year, which was just 3 months ago. I'm not worried about Stephen Fry. I think he's fine. The goals, they let a guy in behind one-on-one against Steph.
Yes.
As a keeper, you're not going to save 100% of those.
Yes, I
agree. The own
agree.
goal from Nuhu, Fry's yelling keep. He's yelling, this is my ball, and Nuhu doesn't hear him. There's a miscommunication. So I don't think you can put any of the goals on
No, and that's what I said. I don't believe those goals were on him. Just looking at him, though, he's not moving the same, in my opinion.
Okay.
I just don't see that same young, spry, jumpy Stephen Fry. And he's getting a little older. It might be time,
late 30s now.
Time to start investing younger in that position, and him grooming the next person up.
Well, and I will say they really like Andrew Thomas, the keeper behind him. He started all of the U.S. Open Cup games last year out of Stanford. He's a good talent. I will say, whenever Stephen Fry decides to hang him up, that's going to be a sad day for Sounders supporters everywhere. But I like what they have behind him.
And make no mistake, I'm not saying get rid of Stephen Fry or he's
no,
washed.
D-Jack, you said it.
Or
Steph,
he's washed. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying he doesn't look the same right now. Earlier in the season, maybe he needs to work his way back to form. You got Thomas on the bench, pressing definitely for playing time. I saw him against Antigua, and he looked good. So, but Fry needs to get back on it. But it's those backline defenders, and I'm going to get back to Nuhu. Nuhu, come on, man. Come on.
Well, and I mentioned yesterday the Sounders can compete for an MLS Cup, definitely coming off the high of some goal scoring, right? Well, Brian Schmetzer had a bit of a reality check after the RSL game in his post-game presser.
I'm a little bit hot right now because I think what we did
we've won
tonight,
2 games against
even
the
on
team
short
from
rest,
Guatemala.
was very good.
So
some of the
that's
attacking
in no
movements,
way
the
disrespecting,
combination play,
Antigua.
all of that
I
stuff
thought
was
they brought
exciting
as
soccer.
much as they could
And so we worked
application,
really
but
hard
they
on
play
our
in a
attacking
league that
movements
is
in preseason.
not as
We
strong
scored
as
2.
ours.
So nothing but facts from Brian Schmetzer. The Sounders have beaten, a team from Guatemala twice this year. A league that's the MLS is much stronger than. 2 games they should have won, and that's all they have results-wise to show for them this season.
Well, it's kind of ironic, and I think Aaron Levine tweeted this out. They've scored more for basically for the other team. They scored more goals against themselves than their opponents have against them, which is a wacky stat. I can't believe that. With the own goals and the mental defensive errors, it just doesn't make sense. They're better than this. The finger has to be pointed back to Smetzer with the preparation. We have to go back to the drawing board and find out how are we preparing this team to go play. I'm going to go in and call out Smetzer for this one.
Yeah, I feel like Sounders fans would be a lot more comfortable if they had some more points in the regular season standings. Coming off that slow start last year, I think the worst 3 games in franchise history. So hopefully they can get things, the train back on the tracks. Well, tough thing. And I was going to move on, and then I remembered what the Sounders' schedule looks like coming up. Cruz Azul, one of the best teams in Liga MX. LAFC on Saturday, and I know they broke that winless streak against them. But, I was on Kellen Rowe last Friday on Washington Sports Wrap. He's saying the players are still thinking about that. You need to get 2 before you can really put that in the rearview mirror.
Yes.
So it's still the vaunted, LAFC that you don't want to play that has had your number coming in here to Lumen Field on Saturday.
So they're still trying to get over the hump.
They're still trying to get over the hump. And then you got to go to Mexico 3 days later on Tuesday to face Cruz Azul at their place.
This is what you built your team for. This is the depth. This is all the players that you have, the frontline players and the bench. This is why you built this team, is to handle this type of schedule. No excuses for the Sounders. You have enough players. Joao Paulo has been inexplicably missing. Like he's
coming off the bench
so,
this year.
All right, he's coming off the bench, and that's a quality player. So you're bringing quality off of that bench. I don't want no excuses when it comes to how many games or how many matches they play and how many days. No, I expect a win every time.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a tough road. Not making any excuses. It's gonna be difficult for them to get through this stretch. Hopefully they can do it. After the good news is after this Cruz Azul round in the Champions Cup, if they do advance, the round of 8, so what the quarterfinals would be in April. So we're getting rid of these midweek games. They can focus more on the MLS regular season. Guys will have more rest, so that's sort of looking up for the Sounders schedule after they get through this 8 games in 24 days or whatever it's going to be.
I love the CONCACAF tournament. I think it's a great tournament, but my message to the Sounders would keep the main thing. Let's go ahead and prepare to get this MLS Cup.
Yeah, so that's going to do it for this episode of On the Sidelines. If you know any Maverick fans in your life, give them a hug. Kyrie Irving out for the year after they traded Luka, and Anthony Davis, I think, is still in a hospital somewhere.
Are we seeing a curse like Babe Ruth? Or what's going on? They traded Luka, and now everybody goes down.
Yeah. If you have a Dallas Mavericks fan in your life, give them a hug from both of us here from On the
Get better, Kyrie.
Till next time, we'll see you next time on the Sidelines.